And so, those bodies being, or passing through various modifications, due to nature had been deforming, they started to transform, growing on the bodies of the living beings what did not exist before, eyes, mouth, the bodies starting to enter into a more or less new shape. At this time they did not have hair or nails, they were deformed, but much worse than this deformation in which you live. And as everything kept deforming, the bodies were modifying, going through a certain eternity that seemed to last the way it was. As now, you are in this world, having already passed through an eternity, understand each other more or less, and think that the world will never be different. You think that life is as it is and that it will not leave this condition. In the first phase of transformation to the start of this deformation, the bodies were completely different. And the light focus warmed every time more. The other parts of the plane, due to the melting, became melted for good, and the bodies, always undergoing modifications, until they got to a point where they were more or less formed, they could already see, but were deaf and mute. They stayed like that during a long eternity. Yes, that you now consider yourselves advanced and are not born speaking or knowing anything, but only later, if someone teaches you, never mind back then. They stayed a long eternity like that, deaf, mute, they only could see. Afterward, with time, they started to hear. They took another long eternity like that. Later, the voice came out. They howled and yelped. In all these eternities, they were eternal, and all that prevailed was the light, but not as hot as now, after the complete deformation. Then, they understood each other by wave, after the waves, by howling and yelping, and during each of those phases, they thought they would last like that forever. Like now, you think that the world will stay like this for time to come. The light kept increasing its heat, driving the complete deformation of the resin and the gum. Even though there was gum on top, there was water underneath, and everything melted at once. As the heat rose, it melted, going down and down until they got to the point where you are now, in a hole, looking up there. In the eternity when they understood each other by howling and yelping, they were already advanced, and with time, they started to stutter, taking a long eternity with that stutter. They did not understand anything because they did not know how to talk. A stutterer not knowing how to talk keeps stuttering, and they did not have who to teach them. With time, they started to become looser, more advanced stutterers. The voice started to open and they loosened of it each time more. While this went on, everything was slowly coming down, because the sun warmed, and while warming, increasing this heat, the part underneath kept deforming, and as it got deformed, it became ashes, kept going down and down. With time, they became more advanced stutterer, starting to want to talk but without notion of what they were saying. Each of those phases took an eternity, it seemed that it would never end. Until then they were eternal, because nature was not completely deformed, they were not yet totally animals, they did not sleep. It's the same thing, a tree, when born, does not show what it will be, after big is that it starts to show the limbs. Limbs in this direction, limbs in that direction. After formed, it is that it will bear its fruit. And such were the bodies, they did not become right away formed as you are now. The deformation continued and later they became more advanced stutterers, they started to grunt, grum, 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 with each other and started to loosen the voice, lapidating it each time more. Each of those phases took a long eternity. It seemed that they would never leave that. At that time, there were no vegetables of any species, because the ashes of the resin had not yet totally rotten due to the heat not being sufficient to penetrate into depth, where it went little by little. The stutterers, after the grum, 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 it was how understood each other, started to loosen the voice very little and said anything, but did not know what they were saying. Later they started to pay attention and mark the things that they said. What one said, the other tried to say it too, with lots of difficulty. So, with time, they started to mark everything they said. For example, one would say, paw, everyone would keep saying, paw, one would say, dough, they keep on saying that forever, waiting for someone to say another word, until they formed a phrase that they could understand, but very vague. And so, they were always getting better with their way to understand each other, and after a certain time, they already understood each other, stuttering. As they loosened their voices, they have got a dry throat, starting to use water, but very little, starting with some drops in the mouth. In the primitive mouth they were having pleasure with it more and making use of a big portion. The water started to dilate the organism little by little. During this passing is when that vegetation started to come out, but it was very different from this one. Why different? Because during that time, it did not rain, there was only the light focus. Then, they understood each other by stuttering, and the way they understood each other was very insignificant. Until then, they were still eternals. The light each time increasing more, penetrating deeply its heat in the lower parts, which were covered by the ashes, and these, rotten by water, generated microbes due to the rotting ashes and resin, giving origin to germs of all kinds, different from these. And so, they started to understand each other slowly, stuttering. They understood each other regularly, but far from having an understanding about things, yes, like animals, without knowing how to explain anything about their own origin, which is your origin. The vegetation each time more flowery, the light focus each time warmer, and everything distancing from it each time more. The use of water started to happen each time in larger amounts due to the effort they put into stuttering, coming from that the dilation of the organs, and with the dilation of the organs, later coming the desire to eat. Eat this, eat that. Later, they started to eat vegetables they liked. Until then they were eternals. Then, with the use of vegetation in small amounts as food, they were deforming themselves each time more, and each of those phases was a very long eternity. With time, still much more deformed. They were eternals, new formations, already being there, in a progress of well-advanced stutterers. It was when the formation of the moon came in. The formation of the moon is from the deformed virtues of the resin and water, coming later the formation of the stars, also originating from the deformed virtues of the resin and the water, which gathered and deformed into those beings. That is why the moon has influence on everything on Earth, but the formation of these focus started without the influence of the moon. As the focus warmed, the vegetation was modifying and everything was coming down more. After everything almost deformed, the water in penetrating under the ashes, softened certain parts, and these came to disappear, to submerge, because they disappeared and turned into water. Then, came there these divisions of the lands, of the countries. The more solid parts stayed, which are the countries that are there, and the parts that were not solid disappeared, they dove, and the people stayed separated from each other by the water. The water divided the lands. With time you put the name, Earth. These people deformed each time more. Still stuttering, they did not speak, disengaging with time and finding a better way to understand each other. Here the divergence of the languages was born. The vegetation was modifying itself, many poisonous ones popping up, starting then, the cases of death. They ate very little, and this very little was slowly dilating the organs. As the organs were dilating, the living beings were increasing food intake, and without knowing what could be good or bad, they many time fed with the poisonous herbs, those that killed. And so, it is when all the primitive ones started to die, little by little, poisoned, and the new generations taking precautions, noting what could do good and what could do harm, finally, what they could eat. In that way, all the primitives and also the new generations were disappearing. Here, they were stutterers who understood each other more or less, and during that period they were already down there, very down there, and then, the moon already appeared very clear, and the stars also came out already. They were advanced stutterers, but did not yet have knowledge about things. In this phase, the deformation was almost all done, starting then to appear the day and the night. That was just when the primitive ones started to die, and that deformation came to be almost totally to the beginning of what you are now. But stutterers they were, they lived like animals, did not have an understanding of things, a very vague understanding. When day and night started to exist, it did not rain. It started to rain much later, according to the modifications of the vegetables and animals. After the light focus warmed a lot and the resin being deeply deformed, it is that from the plane started to come out the vapor, from the heat of the earth, as you know it, as you coined it. And that vapor rising, accumulating at a certain height, gave later origin to rain. In this time, they were stutterers. Rain started then to appear, but it was a wimpy drizzle, and then the vegetation was already different, and the living beings started to get warm clothes to protect themselves from the weather. The moon did not have its quarters at that time, it was that silvery focus, and only later, with the advancement of deformation, it is when the moon started to run its trajectory, started in its first quarter, then the second, the third, and then, much later, the fourth. Meanwhile, the inhabitants being born and dying, due to the poisonous vegetables they ate, because they did not know all the poisonous vegetables. Conclusion, much later, already all deformed, it started to spring up clearer understandings, and so, each time more, if I have to continue, I have to explain a lot to get to the current life you have. This is to know why no one ever gave solution to anything, and these explanations of these causes are to clear up and brighten this subject, to orientate and to have it well explained and clear for all who never knew how the world was made and never could know by whom it was made. During the time you were beginning stutterers, the vegetation also well advanced, being born from the very ashes that became rotten due to penetration of water, also being born microbes of all types, producing all these animals. They were born from the very ground and due to nature not yet being completely deformed, appearing a lot of animals, which do not exist anymore, which already extinguished their generations. And as the vegetables were modifying themselves, the ground paralyzed the formation of the animals. And so, until you got to the beginning of your progress, so many eternities already passed by. 21 eternities. And until you got to the beginning of this progress of yours, already all of your past had been forgotten by all. The moon already had its quarters, and for the vegetation, the modifications were something different. Already all animals had already being born, and other species of animals completely unknown, extinguished long ago. All of this when you were stutterers who did not understand each other and did not have notion about anything. This is why no one gave, neither could give solution of why you were so. Apparently you know it, but truly not, because all of this, all life transforms from one moment to the next. As an example, the cow gives milk, has life and gives life. From the milk one makes cheese, cheese left until the end of its duration, starts to deform into animals, and those animals turning into different lives. The living being is made of what? Of a gum. And this gum you call sperm, which has life and transforms itself into other microbial lives for the formation of the human body, which, after made and completed, becomes a factory of reproduction of lives. Such human, when dies, transforms, yet, into other lives, which are the microbes generated from the body, and these microbes transform into other lives. Here it is the transformation of bodies. When humans were primitive stutterers, but with some understanding, they did alike the Indians to shelter from the weather. They dwelled in huts, dens, and caves, and from here they advanced each time more, until they made use of tents and shacks of straw and stones. And when that happened, the first steps of this progress were starting. Before the beginning of this progress, the knowledge was different, so was the way of living, and when they understand each other regularly, the progress was based on exchange, different, as also different the vegetation was. And so, due to everyone's virtues being gathered in the sun, in the moon, in the stars, in the resin and gum, which are land and water, from that springed up the vegetables and animals, proceeding from the deformation, which came transforming everything, and everything that transforms, diminishes. That is why everyone depends on these 7 parts. And so, you are seeing that the body is formed from these 7 parts. But why everything that transforms diminishes? Because of the following: a forest with bushes of all sizes, once clear cut, becomes something else. Once cut down and the bushes burnt, they turn into charcoal, transforming from what they were, turning into ashes, they diminished. Later, water getting into the ashes, they settle and become even smaller, the rotten. After rotten, they turn into other beings, due to the microbes, the microbial life. Earth is a conjunct of animals, producing animals by all means, and that is why there is the microbial formation, the animals. These are proven facts, well proven, to prove how was the beginning of the world and its end, and of all, the way it will be, through rational immunization. Here it is the beginning of the world and the end, where you came from and where you are going to, how you came and how you will go. No one in the world knew where they came from or to where they were going to. You grew there like animals, live like animals, and disappear without knowing how to give solution to anything. These facts are here enlightened in this writing to give to the living being the assurance and the knowledge that, in here, you find the solutions to everything, given by me, rational superior. This is for you to know who is rational superior, who is me, treating here to clarify everything appropriately to all universally, and for not confuse me with spiritism. Rational immunization, done by the rational, who is me, explaining who I am, what I am, and what everyone is, what you were and why you could being what you were to become who you are. And so, everyone who settles with rational superior, who is me, will live full of joy, satisfaction, and happiness due to knowing and getting rational immunization. In rational immunization is everything for everyone. That is why I say, read with persistence for you to know how to tell what this discovery is, in benefit of yourselves and of all. There it is, the solid of the solids, the right of the rights, ending all doubt, taking all away from this land of misery where you live, molding in this enchantment, without knowing anything aside of what you see. The mysteries all there to be unveiled in this world, which is an enigma, and everyone is enigmatic. Why is everyone enigmatic? Because your formation and the formation of everything stays there mysteriously. Mysterious bodies, because no one ever knew who made you or how you appeared in this world. Each human being is an enigmatic being due to finding themselves in this situation, without knowing how you were made, how you were formed, of what you were made, nor why you were made. You are, therefore, enigmatic in this world, which is an enigma, and now you will stop being so, due to the salvation, which is there in your hands. You will stop being suggested by this dirt, by this mud, by this muck, many times thinking and judging one thing for another. Admitting everything and thinking life is this one and never conforming to it, because no one is happy with suffering and less so with death. Therefore, so it was for the suggested ones, and it really stopped being so, due to the conformities do not correspond. The suggestion and self-suggestion is what shine in the world as an element of apparent prestige, for the blind ones with open eyes, who never knew how to divulge what these things are, what the world is and what everyone is. The world reigns in this intense confusion, since from long centuries and veteran ages, everyone has been confused with the world and life, and always multiplying the confusions. Since you knew nothing, how could you divulge and define what is right? No way. Now, it is that you are seeing the origin and beginning of everything, before the origin of this deformation, how you were and why you stopped being what you were to be like you are. Everyone rolling on the clamor of adventures, but never were able to tell about these highs. And today, very happy and joyful due to having in your hands all of this writing, which show you that the infant is an animal, who lives like an animal, without knowing nothing. The Greeks with these gears were going to put all in shape by the philosophies, super-philosophies, and tales. And such, so much nonsense and so many to beg in vain. Nonsensical people, now disappointed, seeing come to an end, all of these illusions, through the authentic knowledge of everyone's salvation. You never could put everyone in shape because there were never solid bases in the philosophies, super-philosophies, and stories, as in the Spiritism, which is the knowledge of itself. Why is it the knowledge of yourself? Because you all are spiritualists, live on experience, are also, you do not yet know what now is there in your hands. Therefore, all of these numbed, geared in this gear without solution, will become touched, astonished of knowing why you are so. There is no one who may say that found something without a qualification, because good cannot be said about the work which is the world's salvation. You did not know what salvation is, because you were never saved, now you are knowing what salvation is. It is something no one ever proved, now it is that you are seeing how it is and it is not. What the living being does not know, he does not admit that exists, only after knowing and seeing, it is that one says, that's it. The fluids. The arctiferous fluids are which give the substance of the human being, are which make the union of the harmony of the human being. The fluid of the water, the fluid of the earth, the fluid of the vegetables, the fluid of the animals, the fluid of the sun, the fluid of the moon, and the fluid of the stars, which are the fluids of the seeds of these seven beings, which are the cause and origin of the human body. Fluids of the seeds of the earth, water, vegetables, animals, and of the other arctiferous beings are which give life to humanity. Then it is asked, what is the fluid? Fluid is a living being which gives the effect and the cause of matter, because there is no effect without a cause. Here is the reason to say that the fluid gives life, since life without the fluid would not exist. It is because of the fluid that life exists. The fluid as an animating being, is an animated being, constituted by the action that gives origin to the things. Do you see the wind? No. Do you feel it? Isn't it very powerful? Well, the wind is a fluid. It is invisible. You feel its effects but you do not see it. So is the wind. You feel its effect, which is life, because without the wind, life does not exist, all stays dead, stuffy, all dies by suffocation, there is no air to breathe. That is fluid. One feels and sees its effect, as one sees and feels the effect of the wind. The wind is a fluid, because if there is no wind, if there is no air, everything dies, suffocate. The wind gives life and maintains life. It is an invisible being, as the other fluids from the seeds of the seven parts are, which are the cause and origin of the human body. Then you ask, what is fluid? It is a being that proceeds from the seeds that produce and organize life, and that, not to say fluid, you say seeds. All the microbes that constitute the human being were made from the fluids. The microbe has its origin in the fluid, and the fluid is the animating being of the microbe. There is the electric fluid and the magnetic fluid. Electricity is a fluid that the person feels but does not see, it gives life and takes life. Then, all beings have their fluids, because if the microbes exist, it is because the cause exists, which is the fluid. If there were no fluid, there would not be its effect, for all proceed from the fluidic effect, the electrifying action, which forms this microbial composition existing on this animal place, which you call earth. The fluids of the beings are invisible, like the wind and like the electricity. You feel their effects, but do not see them. The wind, the electricity, and the other fluids are the origin of the beings. The wind is a fluid that gives life and maintains life. The electricity is a fluid that gives life, comprises life, and generates life. Because all of this, because all are fluidically born, because all beings are made of fluids, it is that no one has stability. What is the magnetic force? It is a fluid that hypnotizes. It magnetizes by means of the fluid. Then, there is the bad fluid and the good fluid. There it is the consequence of the sulfuric life, of the sulfuric beings, because they are originated from the fluid, from this condensation that produces this microbial mass originated from the animating fluids. Therefore, if it were not the fluids, there would not be microbes, if there were not the microbes, there would be no life. There are the fluids of the seeds, which are the microbes, and from the microbes, the origin of human being formation. The sun has its fluid. The moon has its fluid. The stars have their fluid. So, these 7 parts that form the world are the origin of the conjunct of life. Then, how are these fluids made? How is the wind made? How is electricity made? Everything is product of the electric and magnetic conjunct, which form the origin and the cause of this deformation, the before of all of this existing and the origin of all of this. Here comes the before you were what you were. Then, let us come to know what you were first for you to know what you are. What were you? Pure and clean rationals and without defects. And why did you come to be what you are? Because of disobedience and rebelliousness. They entered in this part which was not ready to enter in progress, and from there all details are clarified with the continuation of this content of the formation of the universe and all its belongings, visible and invisible. That is why all of you have your good and bad fluids. There are people that only irradiate kind fluids and others only antipathy fluids. Then, there is the bad fluid and the good fluid. The fluid is a being that acts, builds, and destroys. The good fluid does as much good as the bad fluid does evil. What is an inhabitant of the invisible world? It is a fluidically electric and magnetic body. It is not visible to you, but it is to us. It is like the wind, you feel it but do not see. Like the electricity, you feel it but do not see it. So is the body of the inhabitants of the invisible world, who see you, but you do not see them, because you are microbes made from the fluids. Microbes become animals, and then, the human body, which is a material conjunct of animals, because it is from this organic matter, it does not have the necessary strength to see the bodies that are superior to yours. It is a completely different composition. It is the same thing as the electricity and the wind. You feel their fluids, but do not see them. The carbonaro, which is your origin, is a different life, inferior to the fluid which is superior to you, which are the consequences of the fluids. The shadow is the effect of the visible body. The body is the shadow of the fluid. The fluid is the shadow and the effect of the organic beings. The organic beings are the shadow of the before being. The before being is the shadow of what you were. The shadow of what you were is the shadow of what you were before. The shadow of what you were before is the shadow from where you came. The shadow from where you came is from the pure and clean bodies, bodies without defects. And why did they leave to this defeat? They left due to their own wish, and the consequences are those which are there, everyone suffering without knowing how and why they had this defeat. Then, did they not know that they would get in a bad situation? They did. But they wanted to progress on their own wish. On the other part of the plane that exists here, there are others inhabitants who did not want to take that path, and are here with their progress of purity. And why did they take that path? Due to the simple wish to progress the part that was not ready to enter in progress. They kept progressing, and until today are keeping this progress of destruction, and in regression everyone goes, in large steps, not arriving to the extinction because it is coming soon, the eternal salvation by means of rational immunization. To immunize, prove and confirm lapidately with base, solidity, all the knowledge of the beginning and end of all formation, in multiple times, in additional times, taken all proofs of this knowledge content brilliantly lapidated to unite everyone, to equilibrate everyone, and save everyone by means of the true knowledge of the being and the before being, the why of life and the why of everything. Due to the confusing issues of the infants, I come to make all feel for not joking with serious things and not discuss what you don't know, wait for the time to come to know, because a person further ahead prejudices himself by making confusion where there are not. To learn, patience and time are needed. What is the heat? It is a fluid. You feel the heat, but do not see it. You feel the effect of the heat and see its effect. You feel the cold, but do not see it. You see the fluid of the cold and see its effect. Thus, there are the fluids of the seeds that gave origin to the microbes and the microbes to human beings and all beings, being earth and animal bearing. You feel the perfume, which is a fluid, but do not see the fluid of perfume. The fragrance is the consequence of the perfume. You see the perfume, but the smell you don't, and of all, finally. For the delayed one who does not want to see, it is necessary to explain in every way, in every form, to know that from the fluids were born the beings and the beings are a consequence of the fluids, which, in its turn, form the bodies, form lives that generated this formation all existing in the world, because are in the fluids and in the fluids is the origin of everything. In the fluid is the most powerful force of the universe, which is the conjunct of the fluids generated from the 7 parts and the consequence of this formation. The fluid of the day, electric. The fluid of the night, magnetic. The day is warm and the night is cold. The positive with the negative. Now you say, fantastic. Then, wait that with patience all knowledge will be realized, all knowledge will be given to you. Then you say, fantastic. Extraordinary. I warn you all that you should not discuss and even less give opinion to not make mistakes, but wait to be educated of what you do not know from this writing. The greatest fortune of the entire world is here, which is the rational knowledge, the knowledge that everyone needs, the beginning of all and the end of all. Then, the rational knowledge is the greatest treasure of all, since it is the salvation of all, showing now that the fluids of the seeds are the cause and the origin of the beings that are organized there, which are all the bodies, which you did not know their origin because you did not know the fluids that cause the beings. And because everything is made by fluids, it is that all is made fluidically and fluidically are destroyed. From the fluid proceeds everything and the everything for being fluid, reduced to nothing. It generates, is born, growths, and disappears, reducing to nothing fluidically because it dies. The fluid is a deleterious and thus it appears and disappears. It has life and loses life. Everything dilates and decomposes. From the black fluid, it was born the black, from the white fluid, it was born the white, from the yellow fluid, it was born the yellow, and from the red fluid, it was born the red. And thus, here is the reason of colors. This issue is a very important explanation, very beautiful, detailed, minutely, multiplied, rationally. It is an exciting subject. What is it worth to have life, live without knowing why to live? It is worth nothing. It is talking like a parrot, make plans and keep navigating like that without knowing what to say. Your wish will come true. Wait a bit that everything will come. It is the knowledge that everyone needs. To know why you live, and not live like that anymore, maintaining the enchantment, the weeping, and the agonizing suffering, which is the greatest brilliant of everyone in the world, where everyone suffers and say that knows and suffering proving that you do know nothing and, because you do not know anything, suffering is the greatest brilliant of the day. If you knew, you would not suffer. If you knew, you would not die. If you knew, you would not live agonizing, like everyone who inhabits this earth, everyone in agony, some less, some more, and some who do not stand it anymore. Then, for not knowing, for missing to everyone the knowledge, it is that you usually say, life is of suffering until we die. Who are you, that the illusion is so great, incapable to define your I, and to know the definition of the I, and the you, which are electric and magnetic apparatus, formed in this nature, which is an electric and magnetic conjunct, and because you are electric and magnetic apparatus, formed from this electric and magnetic nature, it is that you are like a machine, with its motor. And thus, the head is the watch that receives the electric and magnetic fluids, which are the thoughts. The I is the house of the fluid. The electric and magnetic fluid irradiates over the I of the person. The you is the whole you see of the person, being the person two in one. From inside of the person, the electric and magnetic fluid works, which are the thoughts. The bad thoughts are irradiated from the magnetic part, the good thoughts are from electric influence. So, thought is a fluid, the fluid lives within the electric and magnetic person, and that is why people do not stop thinking, because they are connected to those two currents, because they are made and formed by this such nature. So, you are electric and magnetic apparatus, which receive all intuitions, all communications, which are the thoughts, all ideas, after all, everything that enters the person, which makes the person to think all sort of things, it is the fluid. As the electric and magnetic fluids enter the apparatus, which is the person, also enters rational immunization, which is a different fluid, from this nature, from this electric and magnetic conjunct. So, there it is the I, and the you. The you is the whole that you see of the person, and the I no one sees because it is the fluid, one only feels it. People feel that they are thinking about this, that other thing because they are electric and magnetic apparatus, formed from this nature, which is an electric and magnetic fluidic conjunct, and this is why the person is an electric and magnetic fluidic body, being an electric and magnetic apparatus, which is connected to these two forces, which keep the person not stop thinking. The bad thoughts are from the bad fluid origin. The person feels the thought but does not see it because it is a fluid, it is from the magnetic side. The good fluid is from the electric side. The thought is a fluid, which the person feels but does not see. The same way the person receives those two currents from nature, because the person is an apparatus formed by it, also receives rational immunization. Once the person is in daily contact with the knowledge from rational immunization, the person goes on immunizing, the immunization enters within the person, as does any thought from the electric and magnetic, but much superior because it is from the person's origin, because the person is from rational origin. Then, spring up the equilibrium and welfare of the person, by means of rational immunization fluid within the person. Even with any thought or any other fluid, with the immunization within the person, it goes on immunizing the person with the good fluids, and the person overtaken by the good fluid of rational immunization and the bad fluid cannot, never again, enter the person and cause damage through this or that malady. From there, then, the cures start to happen through the good fluid, because the fluid gave cause and origin to all beings. Because the person is an electric and magnetic body, the person is in contact with the fluids, because the being is this one, due to belong to this fluidic nature, electric and magnetic nature, and thus coming the salvation of the person, through rational immunization. All are electric and magnetic apparatus, formed by this nature, which is an electric and magnetic conjunct, and this is why the person is in contact with these two electric and magnetic forces, and that is why the thought does not stop, because it is always irradiating with those two currents. And so being, the person becomes immunized by rational immunization, which is from the true nature of the person's being. Rational immunization, which is such a natural thing, and because of it, only after the person becomes immunized, it is when the person will feel this reality. It is a different thought from the electric and magnetic, because it is a thought that talks with the person. So, there it is the I, and the you. Being rational immunization the knowledge of the true natural of the person, it is a different thought of this from the electric and magnetic, there, from this enchantment, it is a thought from rational plane, it is a thought from the origin of the animal being, from where everyone left, where everyone came from, and how everyone are going to, through rational immunization. Therefore, everyone belong to this nature, everyone is from this nature, and everyone becoming immunized because the natural is this, everyone is electric and magnetic apparatus. Everyone is from rational, and due to that receives all transmissions or transmission from the rational part, as received from this electric and magnetic conjunct, the electric thoughts and the magnetic thoughts, which are the fluids, thus you feel them, but no one sees the thought. The thought is a fluid. The immunization is a fluid, but it is a superior fluid to the electric and magnetic, which are from there of this deformation. Therefore, any person, by nature, is an electric and magnetic apparatus, and it is linked to the rational part, receiving all transmissions from the rational part fluidically, as received from there, the electric and magnetic thoughts, all the electric and magnetic transmissions, fluidically. To arrive to this conclusion, you only need to read the book Universe and Disenchantment, to know your true nature of electric and magnetic apparatus, made and formed by this nature, which is an electric and magnetic conjunct, and for being apparatus of this formation, that is why you get all the explanation from the place of origin of all, which is rational plane. You receive all orientation through the positive thought, whereas the electric and magnetic is negative, because it is deformed, and rational immunization is positive. Thus, the equilibrium and all explanation brought to the person by rational immunization. The I is the house of the fluid. The I is the inner personality, it is where the exterior understands itself, talks with itself, makes plans. Finally, from the I is that comes everything of the you, which is the personality. The I drives the you, the I guides the you, because it is what the person thinks, idealizes, it is what the person creates inside of the I, it is what the person externalizes, this, that other thing that comes from the I, of the fluidic personality. The thought is the bad or good fluid, electric fluid or magnetic fluid. So, the immunization gets in the I, of the person the same way the electric and magnetic fluid enters and the immunization fluid balances the electric and magnetic, because you are deformed and unbalanced. Once rational immunization fluid, which is the true natural of the person, from the origin of the person, who is a rational animal, who is from rational origin, from rational plane, once the person gets the rational fluid, the person becomes equilibrated because the rational fluid starts to talk into the I, of the person, who is the house of the fluid. Instead of being the electric and magnetic, it starts being the fluid from rational immunization, which is superior, and the true being is this one, and this is why you are rational animals. Then, the person will start to be guided by the person's true being, by the person's true natural of rational, disappearing the animal part because the person is being guided by his origin base, rational plane. Thus, in the rational fluid, in rational immunization, is all the equilibrium of the animal being and the reason why you did not know it. You knew that you were rational animals, but not why. You did not know your origin, and today, knowing your origin, which is rational plane, knowing where you came from and where you are going to and how everything originated. Therefore, the I, the inner personality, understands and communicates with the outer personality, which is the electric and magnetic fluid, and the rational fluid dominates and eliminates the electric and magnetic fluid, because the electric and magnetic is from evil, from matter, from the enchantment, and the rational fluid is from disenchantment, is from the true natural being of the human being, for being from rational plane. Then, in the I, is everything, because the I dominates the you. The person, before doing this or that, first thinks what is going to say, what is going to do, what is going to solve, starts to talk to it with the outside. Then, many, because they do not know their being, say, I am receiving this intuition. The intuition is the fluid. Because many times the person does not know the reason of the electric and magnetic fluid, of the electric fluid's action, of the magnetic fluid's action, then the person says it is receiving an intuition or receiving an inspiration. It is not an inspiration, but a communication from the electric or magnetic fluid. Others say, I am ratiocinating because I am a rational animal, but I am ignorant of my origin. Today, then, you are knowing your origin and how to communicate with it and how to join it, which is rational immunization. Then, it is the fluid that guides the person, because it gives this or that thought. Once the person possesses the immunization fluid, gotten from the knowledge of his own natural, always going from good to better, starts to succeed in everything, because you will receive from the rational fluid all precise orientations for your equilibrium, for the goodness, for the happiness of everyone. Therefore, in the fluids is everything. Care for knowing what rational immunization is, to become immunized by the rational fluid, then, this fluid guides the person in everything, eliminate the ills of the body, because the effect of the magnetic fluid ceases and the effect of the electric fluid ceases. Cease, then, the ills of the body, because the rational fluid eliminates the bad fluid, the magnetic fluid and the electric fluid. Despite being electric and magnetic apparatus, but you are, indeed, electric and magnetic apparatus of rational category, and now knowing the true natural of your being and the true natural of all beings. Therefore, the I understands with the invisible personalities of the electric and magnetic are of rational plane. Once the living being is immunized, the understanding is from the place of origin, and so, the fluid is what dominates the person, is what guides the person, and that is why everything the person will do, first thinks how is going to resolve, how has to resolve, after that, then, put it in execution, if goes this way, if goes that way, if will do this, if will do that, first thinks. It is the thought which is the person, which is the good or bad fluid, and once the person is guided by the rational fluid, only goes always from good to better, because the fluid talks inside the person, inside its house. Therefore, care to become immunized, to know your true natural, to get rational immunization, the rational fluid, so that everything goes right in everyone's life. The rational fluid is positive and the electric and magnetic fluid is negative, because it is deformed, because you are beings from deformation, and because of this you live there in constant disarray, due to the electric and magnetic fluid. The magnetic fluid brings sadness, annoyance, contrariety, hopelessness, agony, bad dreams, bad thoughts, disconcerting thoughts, mistrust, fear, brings everything bad. All of this, effect of the magnetic fluid, and that is why the human being becomes unbalanced, due to the magnetic fluid, which only brings disturbance to the human being, because of it being worse than the electric fluid. The electric is bad because it is deformed, and the magnetic fluid is even worse, because in it is all evil, it is the destroying fluid. To eliminate the influence of these two fluids, only rational immunization fluid then eliminates these two, because rational immunization fluid is of superior category, because it is not from here of the electric and magnetic, it is from rational plane, it is from rational immunization, it is only good, and from good everyone goes always to better. From it the equilibrium is never had, and then all from good to better on the whole world, trough the orientations and conferences done with rational immunization inside your inner being, inside your being that communicates with your outside and that comes from inside your being, which is rational immunization. Then, cease the suffering of you all, because you will not be subject to the electric and magnetic fluids anymore, from there comes the good of all and the true happiness, because the person then starts to live right and is right about everything. Cease, then the doubts, mistrust, and fears, because will receive all the precise orientations for the equilibrium of your life. Then, it is there, the biggest discovery of all times, rational immunization, and many, at start got confused because they did not know how to interpret, for ignoring, not know, for not have knowledge of what is rational immunization. The you, which is the whole of the person, which executes what is within the I, which is the fluid that gives this or that thought to do this, that, or this other thing, therefore, it is in the I, the superiority. The I in first place, the you in second place, because the I governs the you, which is the whole of the person. The command comes from the inside to outside, it comes from the inside, which is the electric and magnetic fluid. But, once immunized, only the fluid of rational immunization functions in the I. It eliminates the electric and magnetic, because it is the fluid from the true natural being of the person, which is from rational origin. For being deformed and become rational animals, they turned into animals, and that is why you came from animals, are made from the animal, which are the microbes and the viruses. Then, there is the whole and the everything that everyone needs most, which is rational immunization. Then, do not waste any more time, care to know and read with persistence, for become immunized and not anguish any more the way you have been anguishing, and not suffer any more than you have been suffering, for you not to stay in this agony, in this doubt, in this state of is it, or is it not? All for being troubled beings by the electric and magnetic fluid.